In this video, I'm going to show you how to construct a screen. I've given you some examples of screens. Here's one of them. And the idea with this part of the exercise is that you are working with light and shadow. So I'm in my top view of the project, and I have an area right here where there's an opening between two spaces. One is open to the sky and one has a roof, and so I'm going to place a screen between those two spaces. I've measured this and it's about 24 feet. I'm going to make one panel that's 6 feet wide. Okay. Also, as you sort of think about how you're going to construct this, you want to know the height as well. So this opening here is 8 feet high. So my screen is going to be 6 feet by 8 feet. Now I'm going to go to the front view, so I'll be in the orientation that I would be when I insert this screen. And I'm going to make a simple rectangle. I'll just snap to a point here. That rectangle is going to be 6 feet wide by 8 feet, and then I'm going to move it over to the side here. All right, so there's a couple of ways that you could make the screen. One would be that you generate a panel that has thickness and then you puncture a series of holes in it. The other way would be to construct a series of shapes with sort of surface surrounding an opening, and then basically make an array of it and make a union out of it. I'll show you both ways. So first of all, what I'm going to do is extrude this so it has some thickness. I'll make my screen 1 inch thick. Okay. So if I go to a 3D view, I can see now that there's some thickness to my screen. All right, let's go back to the front view. Okay, and the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of cylinders that I'll then subtract from this panel. So it's like a panel that has a series of holes in it. If I go to the Home tab, and if you click on this pull-down menu, one of the options is to make a cylinder. I'm going to snap to the corner of this, and I'm going to give it a radius of 1 inch, and I'm going to give it a sort of a height of 2 inches. So now let's take a look at this in 3D. So you can see there's a little cylinder that's on the face of that panel. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this cylinder so that it is sort of, instead of being on the face of it, it's now going to be through the main portion of the panel. And I'll move it again so that it is sort of lapping the front and back. So I'll be sure to get a clean hole through the object. I'll go back to my front view, and I'm going to zoom back into the panel, and I'm going to move it. I'm going to move that cylinder 3 inches over and 3 inches upward. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll change this to conceptual, and I'm just going to tract the panel, press enter, and then pick the cylinder. As you can see, and I'll zoom in a little closer, it's made a hole through the panel. Okay. Now I'm going to undo that so that I can then array the cylinders and make a sort of a pattern of holes. So I type in array. Let's go back so you can see a little bit more clearly to 2D wireframe. All right, array, select the cylinder. It's a rectangular array. So it's going to default to making 4 columns and 3 rows, and I'm going to change these values. Let's try 25 columns. So that's a little bit too many. You know, and you can also adjust the distance between the columns and rows. Let's try 23. That seems to work okay. And let's try 30 rows. Looks like we might need one more. 31. Okay, so now I have this array, and the array tool basically groups these things. But instead, I want to use these cylinders to make holes through my panel, so I'm going to click on X, which will explode the array. So now what I have is a series of 3D solids, as you can see here. All right, let's go back to our conceptual view, and I'm going to subtract, and I'll just take a small group of these to illustrate this. So you can see it's made a bunch of holes through that, and I'll go ahead and finish out with the rest of the panel. Okay, so I've completed the one panel, and now I'm going to show you how to do the same thing, only instead of subtracting through sort of an additive or union-based process. So I've created another rectangle, and I will show you a way of doing a similar type of pattern with a series of circles, only I'm going to use this sort of, I'm going to use the union command. Right. So I've made this rectangle just as a sort of reference to construct this. I'm going to make a circle, and I'll make the circle 2 units wide. And then what I will do is offset that 1 inch. Right. I'm going to extrude the 2 shapes 1 inch like I did the other one, and then I'm going to subtract the inner object from the outer one, so I have basically like a donut. Move it over, say, 3 inches, and I'll move it up also 3. Well, there. For this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array of this sort of donut object. Okay, so there are 4 columns again and 4 rows, and I'll begin playing with the numbers of rows and columns that I need. Click on that again, and let's try 15. All right, now the problem with this particular array is that the objects don't touch one another. So what I can do then is to change the distance between them. Let's try 6 inches. So now they are touching, and if I click on this again, okay, and I can continue to make a few more adjustments in the array to get the right numbers of, let's try 16 here, and 12. All right, so now that I have the numbers that I need to fill that rectangle, and as I mentioned, it is an array, and if an array constructs a sort of group out of it, what I can do is explode the array and instead join them as a union. So let's try a union command and select 2 of them. So now what happened is they're now part of one object, and you can do that with the entire group. But I also want to construct a frame around the entire panel, so it will look similar to this one. So what I'm going to do is offset my outer rectangle by 1, and I'll go through the extrusion process and extrude the 2 forms and subtract the inside out. So extrude, select this one, enter, then subtract from the outer one, I'll subtract the inner one. Okay. All right, so now if I zoom out so I can see the whole thing, what I can do is union the whole panel. So I'll just make a window out of the whole set of donuts and the frame. So now it should be one object. And from there you can then take the frame and move it into the model, set up camera views. Let's change this to 2D wireframe. And it into place. So now I've moved the two panels into the opening, and I can test them by running some renderings and setting up some camera views.